Let me tell you something that most people overlook when dealing with toxic individuals. Silence isn't weakness, it's your superpower. Most of us are taught to speak up, to defend ourselves, to explain our side when someone crosses a line. That's what feels natural. We want to be understood. We want to clarify, correct the lies, fix the misunderstanding. But here's the truth: toxic people aren't confused. They're not accidentally stepping on your boundaries. They know exactly what they're doing. And every time you engage, you're handing them energy, attention, control. That's why I say silence is your power move, not your surrender. When you choose not to respond, when you don't return the insult, when you don't explain your silence with paragraphs of justification, that's when the shift begins. It's a psychological reset. You're no longer dancing to their rhythm. You've changed the music. There's something deeply unsettling to a manipulator when they can't get a rise out of you. Your lack of response denies them the satisfaction they crave. They poke, they prod, they twist your words, not to understand you, but to get an emotional reaction. That's the currency they live on. But when you respond with calm stillness, when your silence speaks louder than your voice ever could, that's when they realize the game is over. Now, some people confuse silence with passive behavior. They think it means you're letting someone get away with something. But this isn't about letting anything slide. It's about choosing your power. You don't need to announce your boundaries to people who already know. They're crossing them. You don't need to fight in a war that only exists because they keep throwing bombs to provoke you. Silence isn't passive. It's decisive. It's restraint at its highest level. Think of it like this: the most dangerous storm is the one that's calm before it hits. There's something unnerving about silence because it forces people to confront their own noise. A toxic person, left alone with their own reflection, has no one to project onto. That's why they press for a reaction, because it lets them avoid facing themselves. Your silence becomes a mirror, and most of them can't handle what it shows. But let's be real, it's not easy. It takes discipline to not reply to the jab. It takes strength to walk away from the conversation that's designed to pull you back in. It takes self-awareness to realize not every attack deserves a counterattack. Not every fire needs to be put out by you. Some fires burn themselves out when you stop feeding them oxygen. And here's the deeper, more philosophical part of this: silence is also a reclaiming of your internal space. Toxic people don't just waste your time, they waste your inner peace. Every argument, every defensive explanation, every angry reply, they don't just take minutes off your day, they take energy off your soul. And silence is how you guard that energy. It's how you say, "This is my mental real estate." You don't get to live here rent-free. When you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you start to grow. You begin to operate at a higher level, where not everything needs to be said, and not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. You gain clarity. You start to recognize that the loudest voices are often the most insecure. And your silence, it's not an absence, it's a presence. It's a statement. It says, "I'm not engaging on this level anymore. I've elevated, and let me tell you, people notice." The first time you respond to drama with stillness, they'll test you. They'll push harder. That's normal, because people are used to the old version of you, the one who reacted, who explained, who pleaded to be seen. But when you hold your silence, when you stay calm and you don't flinch, that's when they start to see the new version, the grounded version, the version that doesn't play tug of war with people who drop the rope just to watch you fall. Eventually, the toxic ones fade, not because they changed, but because you did. They realize they no longer have influence over you. You're not a source of emotional chaos for them to feed on anymore. And when someone can't feed off you, they move on. It's that simple. You starve the dysfunction by refusing to serve it your reaction. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, remember, you don't have to join them. You can stand still. You can be quiet. You can be the eye of the storm. That's where your power lies, not in the shouting, not in the defending, but in the calm, conscious decision to not entertain the chaos. This isn't about being passive or cold. It's about being in control. Emotional control is self-respect in action. Silence, when chosen intentionally, says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to you. And that's what toxic people can't handle. Because when you stop reacting, you take back the very thing they were using against you, your attention. So do this once. The next time someone tries to bait you, don't bite. Pause. Breathe. Let them sit in their own noise. Let your silence be the last word, not because you gave up, but because you finally took your power back. And that one moment of silence, that one act of stillness, it will echo louder than any argument ever could. Let's talk about something that instantly shifts the power dynamic between you and any toxic person in your life. Boundaries. Real ones. Firm ones. And here's the truth. You only need to set one unbreakable boundary to change everything. Just one. But it has to be firm and it has to be final. Most people overcomplicate boundaries. They try to sugarcoat them, over-explain them, or constantly renegotiate them to avoid conflict. But toxic people are experts at using that hesitation to push you further and further past your limits. What you need to understand is that toxic individuals aren't confused by your boundaries. They're simply testing how committed you are to them. They don't need more clarity. They need consequences. And the moment you stop explaining and start enforcing, you change the game entirely. You see, when someone truly respects you, your first boundary is enough. They may not like it, but they accept it. They recognize your space. But toxic people, they see your boundary as a challenge, a dare, a puzzle they're determined to solve. They ask, why can't I call you at midnight? Or, why didn't you text me back right away? Or, why are you being distant? Not because they don't understand, but because they want you to start doubting yourself. That's the manipulation. That's the play. And here's where most people go wrong. They start justifying. They try to make the toxic person feel better about the line that's been drawn. But every explanation becomes an invitation for pushback. Every, I just need space right now, turns into, are you mad at me? Every, I'm not okay with that, becomes, can't you just make an exception this once? And if you're not grounded, you cave. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. You care. You want to be fair. But fairness to others can't come at the cost of disrespect to yourself. That's why I say, set one unbreakable boundary and stop explaining. It could be your time, your emotional energy, your availability, your personal space, your need for peace. Whatever matters most to you. Draw the line clearly, kindly, and without apology. Then let your actions do the rest. Boundaries are not up for debate. They are not up for emotional bartering. You don't need to rehearse a TED Talk just to defend your right to be respected. And let's go deeper for a moment, philosophically. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about defining yourself. When you set a boundary, you're not saying, you can't do this. You're saying, if you do this, I won't be participating. You're not changing their behavior. You're changing your availability to tolerate it. And that shift is powerful. It moves the center of gravity back to you. Because here's the psychological truth. People treat you based on the standards you consistently uphold. Not the ones you talk about, or the ones you hope they'll magically honor. And toxic people especially, they read your boundaries like a map. They look for soft spots. They study your tone. They clock your hesitation. And if they find wiggle room, they take it. Every time. So when you finally say, this is what I allow, this is what I don't, and I'm done explaining it, you stop being a target. You stop being someone they can manipulate with guilt, obligation, or confusion. And you start being someone they have to respect or eventually leave alone. Either outcome is a win. But let me be honest, the moment you set a hard boundary, things often get louder before they get quieter. The toxic person might escalate. They'll press. They'll guilt trip. They'll try to make you feel cold or unreasonable. That's not a sign you did it wrong. That's a sign you finally did it right. They're reacting not to your cruelty, But to their loss of control, you're no longer predictable, no longer pliable. And for someone who thrives on power over you, that's terrifying. So the key is not just setting the boundary, but standing by it without flinching, without second guessing, without performing emotional CPR on someone who's offended by your self-respect. This is where strength is built. Every time you choose to uphold your limit, even when it's uncomfortable, you're teaching yourself and the world what you will and will not tolerate. And something incredible happens over time. You begin to notice how peaceful your life becomes when you stop granting access to people who don't respect your terms. You start to realize that boundaries don't push the right people away, they reveal them. The ones who care about you will adjust. They'll honor your space. They won't make you beg to be respected. But the ones who disappear, they were never invested in a real connection, only in the control they had when you didn't protect yourself. So here's the practice: choose one boundary you've been afraid to set. Just one. Something you've allowed to slide too many times. Set it clearly, enforce it quietly. And then stop explaining. Let your life reflect that boundary, not your words. Because the most powerful boundary is the one that doesn't need constant reminders. It's just there. Firm, silent, immovable. And the next time someone crosses it, you don't need to argue. You don't need to fight. You simply remove access. You shift your energy. You detach with peace. And you keep walking. Because in the end, boundaries don't just protect your peace. They teach others how to treat you. And when you finally commit to just one unbreakable boundary, no debates, no footnotes, no guilt, that's the moment toxic people realize they have no more room in your life. Here's the part most people don't realize when it comes to toxic relationships, whether it's a partner, a family member, a coworker, or a so-called friend. You can't win if you're emotionally involved in their chaos. You can't out-argue someone who twists the facts. You can't out-give someone who takes without limit. And you absolutely cannot out-care someone who doesn't care at all. That's why the third and final shift, the one that truly changes the game, is emotional detachment. Now, emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you become cold, robotic, or heartless. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is that you stop tying your internal peace to their external behavior. You no longer let their highs and lows dictate your center, because if your emotional state depends on how they're treating you that day, then they still own you emotionally. And the truth is, toxic people feed on that ownership. They thrive when they know they can get inside your head. If they can make you angry, hurt, confused, jealous, they win. Not because they're better, but because they've dragged you down into the emotional mud where they operate best. The fight, the drama, the tension, it's not a side effect of toxicity, it is the strategy. That's why detachment is such a powerful move. The moment you stop trying to control the outcome, stop needing to be right,